Hello everyone. So this video is probably going to be a little bit controversial and I'm still going to do it. But, I will put in the little disclaimer here that I do not agree with the whole Klan procedures. Like, I do not agree with what they stand for, how they act, the violence, different things like that. My grandfather was a member of the Klan, and growing up, he was not secretive about it. I discovered his robe and hood when I was about 7 years old, and he actually had it folded up and put in the closet with the sheets and stuff. And when my grandmother asked me to go get a sheet, that's what I pulled out and handed to her. I ended up getting basically the beating of my life because I had disturbed his, as he said, sacred garments. And then from then on out, he was very open with his views of racial identities and different cultures, and it was sickening. It was horrific. Now, I never went to any of the meetings, or, I wasn't just sitting in the truck while he was out at his bonfires or whatever. I had nothing to do with any of that. But I would see his manner after he would come in. He was very vocal about where he was going and what he was doing, which now makes no sense to me since they are or were supposed to be a secretive group. His vocal ability about some of the things that they did, like, I really to this day do not know how he did not end up in jail. But looking back at some of the town and the police and the judges and stuff, I really do believe that they were all part of it as well. That's just my opinion. There is no proof of it. But I've done this long enough to know kind of who fits in where. So, this video is about the Klan. It's not based on my opinions or anything, it's the history of them and the laws that were enacted to pretty much shut them down, which we all know they still exist. They have not been shut down. And if the Klan in any way has affected you, your family, loved ones, friends, whatever, I am very sorry that you had to endure that. Because I know even on the outside looking in at somebody that is a member of them, you get traumatized. I can only imagine the trauma that is associated to being on the other side of it. And it literally breaks my heart thinking about it. So, a little disclaimer: I do not view things in the manner that the Ku Klux Klan views things. The KKK was founded in 1865 and extended into almost every southern state by 1870. It became a vehicle for white Southern resistance to the Republican Party's Reconstruction era policies aimed at establishing political and economic equality for Black Americans. Its members waged an underground campaign of intimidation and violence directed at white and Black Republicans. Though Congress passed legislation designed to curb Klan terrorism. The organization saw its primary goal, the reestablishment of white supremacy, fulfilled through Democratic victories in state legislatures across the South in the 1870s. After a period of decline, white Protestant nativist groups revived the Klan in the early 20th century, burning crosses and staging rallies, parades, and marches, denouncing immigrants, Catholics, Jews, African Americans, and organized labor. The civil rights movement of the 1960s also saw a surge of the Ku Klux Klan activity, including bombings of black schools and churches and violence against black and white activists in the South. A group including many former Confederate veterans founded the first branch of the KKK as a social club in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1865. The first two words of the organization's name supposedly derived from the Greek word kaikos, meaning circle. In the summer of 1867, local branches of the Klan met in General Organizing Convention and established what they called an invisible empire of the South. Leading Confederate General Nathan Bedford Forrest was chosen as the first leader or Grand Wizard of the Klan. He presided over the hierarchy of Grand Dragons, Grand Titans, and Grand Cyclopses. The organization of the Ku Klux Klan coincided with the beginning of the second phase of post Civil War Reconstruction put into place by the more radical members of the Republican Party in Congress. After rejecting President Andrew Johnson's relatively lenient Reconstruction policies in place from 1865 to 1866, Congress passed the Reconstruction Act over the presidential veto. Under its provisions, the South was divided into five military districts, and each state was required to approve the 14th Amendment, which granted equal protection of the Constitution to former enslaved people and enacted universal male suffrage. At its, at its peak in the 1920s, Klan membership exceeded 4 million people nationwide. From 1867 onward, black participation in public life in the South became one of the most radical aspects of Reconstruction. As blacks people won election to Southern state governments and even to the U.S. Congress. For its part, the KKK dedicated itself to an underground campaign of violence against Republican leaders and voters, both black and white, in an effort to reverse the policies of radical Reconstruction and restore white supremacy in the South. They were joined in this struggle by similar organizations such as the Knights of the White Camellia and the White Brotherhood. I will also be doing videos about those as well. At least 10% of the black legislatures elected during the 1867 to 1868 constitutional conventions became victims of violence during Reconstruction, including 7 who were killed. White Republicans derided as carpetbaggers and scalawags, and black institutions such as schools and churches, symbols of black autonomy, were also target for Klan attacks. By 1870, the Ku Klux Klan had branches in nearly every southern state. Even at its height, the Klan did not boast a well organized structure or clear leadership. Local Klan members, often wearing masks and dressed in the organization's signature long white robes and hoods, usually carried out their attacks at night, acting on their own, but in support of the common goal of defeating radical Reconstruction and restoring white supremacy in the South. Klan activity flourished particularly in the regions of the South where black people were the minority or a small majority of the population and was relatively limited in others. Among the most notorious zones of Klan activity was South Carolina, where on January 4, 1871, masked men attacked the Union County Jail and lynched 12 black prisoners. Alexander Walker, Sharner Gordon, Andy Thompson, Sylvanus Wright, Barrett Edwards, Thomas Byers, Aaron Thompson, Joseph Vanlum, Mac Bobo, Amos McKissick, Ellison Scott, and Bill Fincher. The KKK continued to engage in terrorist raids, employing intimidation, destruction of property, assault, and murder to achieve its aims and influence upcoming elections. In a few southern states, Republican organized militia units to break up the Klan. In 1871, passage of the Ku Klux Klan Act led to 9 South Carolina counties being placed under martial law and thousands of arrests. In 1882, the U.S. Supreme Court declared the Ku Klux Klan Act unconstitutional, but by that time, Reconstruction had ended and much of the KKK had faded away. Or so says history. That's one of the things that they teach you, but reality is it still exists even today. The 20th century would see 2 revivals of the KKK. One in response to immigration in the 1910s and 20s, and another in response to the African American civil rights movement of the 1950s and 60s. Various chapters of the KKK still exist in the 21st century. According to the Southern Poverty Law Center, white supremacy violence is again on the rise in America. Several high profile events, including the 2015 Charleston church shooting, the 2017 Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, the 2018 Pittsburgh synagogue shooting, the 2019 shooting in El Paso, Texas Walmart, and the 2022 Buffalo supermarket shootings were all fueled by white supremacy and racism. Now, the Ku Klux Klan Act of 1871, also known as the Ku Klux Klan Act, Third Enforcement Act, Third Ku Klux Klan Act, Civil Rights Act of 1871, or Force Act of 1871. It is an act of the United States Congress which empowered the President to suspend the writ of habeas corpus to combat the Ku Klux Klan and other terrorist organizations who had terrorized and murdered innocent African Americans, public officials, and white sympathizers in the previous Confederate States of America. The act was passed by the 42nd United States Congress and signed into law by the United States President Ulysses S. Grant on April 20th, 1871. But before that, there was the first KKK Act. It was a Civil Rights Act of 1870, 16 Statute 140 to 146. Prohibited discrimination in voter registration on the basis of race, color, or previous condition of servitude. established penalties for interfering with a person's right to vote, gave federal courts the power to enforce the act and to employ the use of federal marshals and the army to uphold it. Passed by the 41st Congress, 1869 to 1871, as H.R. 1293. And then the second KKK Act, Civil Rights Act of 1871. I think this one was in 1871. 16 Statute 443 through 440 placed all elections in both North and South under federal control, allowed for the appointment of election supervisors by federal circuit judges, authorized U.S. Marshals to employ deputies to maintain order at polling places, passed by the 41st Congress from 1869 to 1871 as H.R. 2634. And then the third one that I started this with, the third KKK Act 1871, 17 Statute 13 through 15, enforced the 14th Amendment by guaranteeing all citizens of the United States the right afforded by the Constitution and provided legal protection under the law passed by the 42nd Congress in 1871 to 1873 as H.R. 320. Now, since that time, members of the KKK, and I'm actually working on gathering names, dates, court docket numbers, and different things like that. But they did actually take some of the states and stuff to the Supreme Court to try to overrule all of this because they wanted their freedom of speech and the right to assembly. Now, I'm all for civil rights. We all have the right to say what we want, and we all have the right to assemble where we want. But the fact that they wanted those rights to cause all this harm, end the life of so many people, torture others, it's crazy that their fundamental thoughts was based on so much violence due to racism. But I will be dropping videos about some other brotherhoods and stuff back during this time, as well as the names in those court dockets and stuff. I think there's actually one put on my community page. It's like the full court docket of one of them that took somebody to court for something. I don't remember. I have seen so much. But that was just a little bit of the history and a lot of the history that America tries to cover up. There will be more to come. This is a serious matter. Much love, everyone. Have a great day.